Skill. No. I just want to live in Fantasyland with skill all day. It's fine, dude. I mean, I make $100 out of 300 hours of work. Pays out dividends. Let me just try out this outfit real quick, and then I'll get going. That outfit with that haircut. Oh, this is the big one. Oh, Shazam! Wild Arms is a traditional JRPG disguised as a standard RPG released in 1997 for the PlayStation in North America. Developed by Media.Vision and published by Sony a few scant months before a behemoth of a title was to be released. Try to guess which one. It was a huge relief to play a game in this exact style back then, as us sweaty, gross gamers were glued to the pages of publications, plastering that game on each cover, sometimes to the point where the pages of those magazines would stick together for some reason. As I recall, it was just nice to get an RPG fix before September 7th, so I knew I had plenty of time to finish this now relic in history. And as I recall very little about the story besides a balloon rising into the sky and a liberal use of roller skates to avoid random encounters, I thought, why the hell not? Let's dive back into this curious game. Thanks as always to my Patreons for sticking with me while I churn out this 9,000-word essay on this ancient title. South Boogie Bio, It's Joe's Fault, Hiroshima, Porygon for the win, and Serval K. Your donations keep me motivated to sit through games like this, so thank you! Wild Arms has an opening sequence that I missed on my playthrough, and I didn't see until I played through the entire thing twice. I'm going to leave out most of the details as it's a bit unfair to my own writing process, as I had no idea this thing existed, and I'm not quite sure why this is left out of the main opening, as it also gives some context to plot points that come up later. For now, shit is going down, a king is groveling for his life in exchange for a cocoon of this invading force, and this woman sacrifices herself to delay an unknown antagonist, so this character can get away in a snowy opening. Good shit. Kind of annoyed right now. Moving on. The game officially begins with naming our hero, although you can pick these characters in any order you want. Deciding against the lore of the game, I'm renaming this boy to Thrill House. Thrillho has done an okay job being a barrel mover, earning his keep for the day. Instead of giving you a portion of Gela, this game's currency, for a day of hard labor, he gives you a healing berry, cheap fuck. You explore the town, learning the innocence of all of its inhabitants when you finally learn of a boy that went off to a nearby cave to access a special berry that will heal his dad. But before that, you get to learn of the many mechanics that borrow from Zelda: Link to the Past, including the dashing, item throwing, and bomb placement. All that's missing is that doo-doo-doo sound effect when you find a secret, and we would have ourselves a lawsuit from our Nintendo overlords. Once inside the cave, you will start to experience the bane of my existence, and most JRPG players, the dreaded random encounters. While this game has a reasonable rate to fight enemies, the game's largest detriment will immediately rear its head: the in-battle presentation. Even though the game predated Final Fantasy VII by a fair amount, it paled in comparison to just about any game of its style, choosing a heavily super-deformed 3D look for its characters and enemies, and a startling generic battle theme that gets old by around the third fight, reminding me of some kind of Sports Center update. Unfortunately, this title's battle theme it's not great. At this time, Wild Arms is knowingly attempting to combat the yet unreleased Final Fantasy VII, with even an alpha footage looked fantastic in its presentation, with its changing camera angles to spice up the otherwise generic attack animations. However, since they went with the models of heads 4 times the size of their bodies, it just looks bad no matter how you slice it up. But presentation isn't everything, and this game will prove it at some point, but it's hard to deny that they dropped the ball here, in my opinion. The battle system is typical fare of the genre. Fight, cast magic, defend for some reason, and you also have a force meter that charges up abilities, including Thrillho's ability to lock on when firing his arm, allowing 100% accuracy from the apparent 10% that this little dude has. It's a perfectly cromulent battle system of the time, and really can't be faulted for following the conventions that it had up to this point. with the exception of having only one battle track for random encounters, which after Earthbound had made its debut should never again had been done. Why was having a variety of music for these encounters so hard to do? Back to our tutorial cave, we make our way to Tony, who is very happy to get the holy berries. This stirs up something ancient, which appears to be the cause of an earthquake felt throughout the area. Once Tony's reunited, a boss appears from behind, and Thrillhold proceeds to shoot the piss out of him, America style. After the battle is over, he throws the berry at the regenerating zombie, which sludgifies it. The extremely entitled fucknuts of the village of Surf are grateful of saving the kid for all but 1 second before chastising him, and eventually casting him out of the village, not even allowing our blue-haired goon to buy any supplies on the way out. Blue-haired goon? That's terrible. Next, we own in on our second encounter, a very Indiana Jones-inspired chap that, in the introduction of dodging countless traps, is named Meoff Jack. Nah, that's no good. How about Jabba Dabba? I'm guessing you might not know that reference, and I wouldn't blame you. The reason of that is quite simple. I made it up. This section of the game is more of a tutorial of dashing and light puzzle solving using your little mouse friend Handpan, who unfortunately I cannot rename into anything as remotely cool as Jabba Dabba. Jabba Dabba reaches the end of this area to jostle open an ancient computer containing a holographic image of what Handpan calls an Elu. Elus, whose spelling of the name sucks by the way, are the ancestral race prior to humans in this world that used a combination of magic and technology. It warns our dude of seek not Lilithia, for she is bound to the land of light, and that game's delightful use of top and bottom quotes isn't triggering me whatsoever. Incidentally, when you return to the surface, don't do what I did and try to enter something at random here. The game will send you right back to the start if you do. Once our second hero is established, we will finish our tutorial character intro with Slurp. She's told to let go of her ego. Slurp. Slurp. Slurp, the innocent one. I'm immediately happy with my choice of naming here. Slurp then wakes up in the Abbey, where you are afforded the chance to learn things about the game's mechanics, and eventually gaining both the Teardrop, a magical item that magnifies nearby objects, and the Pocket Watch, which resets the room you're currently in and progresses the plot here. You can also use the Crest Graph to create spells based off of metrics that mix and match features, which is neat in concept, but personally feels like you can unlock a list of any of the spells in the game from the get-go, rather than actually mixing and matching. Just pick the spell you think will work for you and you're good to go. There's a few hints about using the statues in the courtyard to progress, and once you get inside, have a dungeon to romp through. Once at the end, you are forced to battle with the boss Novagil, a wonderfully unpronounceable name. You are then given some vague expositional foreshadowing about being the child of innocence, and that everything begins with Lilithia prior to being put back into the Abbey. All of the characters are to meet up in Adelheid, where our journey begins. There's a commotion when arriving with the last character selected, with this group clamoring about Emma and injured people. It's not until reaching this house that the party discovers that there's a disaster at Lilithia's tomb to the north, giving a reason for these three to party up for our first proper dungeon romp. There's some very Zelda-esque puzzles to solve and a few dozen random encounters before reaching the Megtorius. This boss poses little challenge as I make liberal use of the Force ability to accentuate items as Slurp, making the healing berry heal all 3 characters instead of just one. Sweet deal. After this boss, you reach the Golem at the end, which prompted the characters to speak with the professor. And since my reading retention is that of a 4th grader, didn't think Emma to being the professor, so I spent a better half of an hour of gameplay running around the town to trigger the next plot point. This includes visiting the nicest, friendliest, and most certainly alive king of the castle, aptly named King Adelheid, but all of his friends keep calling him Deadmeat. Deadmeat is actually the father of Slurp, who has been on a sort of pilgrimage and has been enjoying laying low with the other 2 poor-ass heroes and wants to keep it that way. Finally, I found Emma right back where she was at the tomb, off to the left of the entrance. I'm calling bullshit on this, just saying. They hoist the golem out of the tomb using the Emma motor, which I think in our terms is a motor. The golem is added to the festival that just so happens to be goings-ons in the town of Adelheid, where we can play some mini-games such as this one that lets you dash forward towards a wall and stop at the last second, or this one that I totally didn't obsess over getting the top time. A dad is looking for his son, who is holding a balloon, and wants you to find him back in town. Once you do find him, we get a major turn of events. Suddenly, dark clouds hover over Adelheid. The laughter and the murmur cease as unsuspecting people look up to the skies. They watch the silent nightmare spread over their heads. The sky is cracking. Like, literally. The beginning of the end is here. The sword of light strikes the land, and a wall of fire rushes across the horizon. See, I totally told you the sky's actually cracking. Thankfully, we are to shield the boy from danger so we can reunite him with his father. Oh, never mind, he's dead. As is most everyone in town, although you do have the option of collecting as many living people in town as possible within a time limit, and retaliate against the attacking forces by running into the characters on screen. Once you get back to the castle, it's made apparent that the demons that invaded want the teardrop and won't stop attacking the castle until they get it. The Wounded King forbids Slurp from trying to give the item up by sequestering the group to her room, starting a really irritating escape sequence. You can't talk to any of the guards, run into them, or be touched by the odd one chasing you as you try to find your way to the basement level, which isn't made clear. After way too many attempts I'd rather forget about, I finally risk talking to the cook here, who lets us into the basement below. Once you fuck about in the sewer levels, you'll make your way back to town and meet up with the head honcho, Belcelik. He insists that he'll spare the castle if we give up the teardrop, and Slurp hands it over. Jabba Dabba is not satiated with this and insists on a 1v1, but against that terrible judgment, the rest of the party joins in for a boss battle. Once we're done with that, the dude just taunts us and teleports away. Come back when you're more of a challenge, kid. Sounds more like a coping mechanism for getting his ass beat, but what would I know from my decades of competitive shooter experience? Back at the king's room, King Deadmeat is annoyed at Slurp's insubordination, and Jabba Dabba is forcing a confrontation at the realization that Slurp is in fact royalty. It's an interesting scene as the game, on replaying, really struggles to capture any tone of what is supposed to be going on. Lines like, "The sword, it's heavy with the weight of its destiny," screams a bad localization to me, and kills the momentum that they were trying to build with this scene. The game cold opens from here, which is a neat touch, finally landing on a tone of defeat and mourning. After the credits roll, the tone is immediately fucked with a cheerful awakening tune of the castle theme, once again validating my point I'm trying to make here. Maybe it's trying to not dip the toes of darkness too hard for younger gamers, bouncing back from a bleak event. I don't know. I'm in the weeds here, I gotta wade my way back into the game. You're told to head west in the commander's room that took the time to put a shit ton of chests in here for you to collect. Once you get to the mountain pass, the guards allow you passage for you to dash right into these pebbles that fuck up your dashing move. Also present are these zappy plants that remind me of the electric seaweed from the TMNT classic. Jabba Dabba gains his lighter here for no real reason, letting us see where we are when lighting up these lamps. It's all very Zelda-esque, and it's a nice way to flavor up the exploration as you find your way through a couple dozen random encounters. I also get poisoned here by the enemies, which prompted the old school question: do I or don't I get the poison to wear off after walking a set amount of steps? The answer is you're fucked if you don't have an antidote handy. So first things first, when I get to Malama Village, stock up on curing consumables. Any more of that flashing and I would have developed a seizure. Fact. Those warnings all these games have now, that was from this game when you're poisoned. This statement is 100% true.
Citation needed.
The bartender at Malama Village gives you a password of sorts that might fuck with some younger players that aren't aware of what these things are. Light 2 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 6, and then 12. We make it to a solo section where Jabba Dabba is forced to remind us that Hanpan can hit switches from a distance. Again and again. Cool, I get it, neat trick. Jabba Dabba clues in on his motivations at the end of this short labyrinth, with aberrations taunting of his cowardice at protesting others. Switching over to our hero Thrillho, we are given the greatest puzzle since the slide puzzle. guessing which way to go by blowing up bombs. This is great. I'm having the time of my life. At the end, Thrillhole is berated at all angles by the assholes that kicked him out of town for using arms. Now it's Slurp's turn, who doesn't have any real items to use puzzle-wise, so we are tasked with guessing left or right multiple times in a row. Riveting stuff, boys, riveting. Also, I accidentally hit the rewind button so I can do it again since it was such a blast. At the end, Slurp is screamed at by royalty and the king's guards, reminding the audience that she's a princess but really doesn't want to be, which is going to be a recurring theme. She's already more likable than Kareen ever was, at least. The Guardians of the Elements shout out more generic nonsense about the teardrop and how it's needed, and we are introduced to our villains here as well, getting me pumped up for some upcoming confrontations. I am picking on this game pretty hard at the moment, but I do recall this game picking up steam the longer I played it back in '97, so let's hope things reoccur. We are whisked away to an unknown land, tasked with finding a seal that the villains seek to break open to revive the being called Mother. Not to be confused with Mother Brain, that's a totally different creature. This will prove to be a huge ordeal, for the next village is over by the end of this sentence. The village chief, who is so old he doesn't remember his own name, says we need to head north to Wind Shrine as part of the 3 shrines that will contain a piece of the evil mother's heart that we are probably going to almost get at each shrine, but not quite, because why wouldn't we fight her at the end? Let's go. Yes, that sound effect is coming from the game. I didn't doctor that. Heading north, we find a circular shrine of sorts that we didn't do much with at the moment, so we continue onward to the mountains. Our puzzle to solve is quite simple for any person with any sense of OCD whatsoever. Everything is in its place. Fight your way up, collect shit, burn things as a bonus, and be absolutely shocked that we didn't get to the shrine in time in order to prevent Fuckface here from breaking the first seal. He drops this spider boss off as a reward, and I get to do summons for the first time. Whoa, look at those graphics, dude. I'm only kidding, they tried their best. I do like how each boss pre-explodes, dies, and then explodes all over the place each time. That's certainly a way to kill them off. You're forced to run back to the entrance if you don't have the spell unlocked to warp to the entrance, so I now know the next use of my magic graph will be. Back at Baskar Village, the chief tells us we need to go to the other 2 locations using the item he's given us, and our path is now set in motion. One more nightmarish moan from this dog for the road. Ugh. Heading northeast, we ignite the furnace to jumpstart an ancient warping device, sending us bouncing off a satellite and back to another part of the planet. Neat. There's a dude in a clearing claiming to not having any memory. South of here, we will find a town of Saint Centaur, a town protected by a magical barrier, keeping all of the monsters out. There's a ton of treasure and other interesting things that we aren't allowed to touch, as everyone is in our way. I can't wait to see what's inside once shit goes sideways here. This dude gives us a key to the place that is essentially a cage for monsters, as to investigate the recent kidnappings of all of our townsfolk. Apparently 30% of the population has so far been abducted and returned with no memory of what happened. I'm getting a bit of Alien vibes here, but I don't think this game gets that dark, right? It's a short jog over to Cage Tower, a series of short floors to ascend, nothing new to the player except the concerning level of random battles to have to contend with. At the top, Alhazad appears and drops a boss for us to deal with, while he leaves to nuke the town of Saint Centaur. After we toast the boss, a lady named Jane arrives to help us with the low cost of 2,000 Gela. Her and her assistant appears to be bounty hunters, I think, as I'm too annoyed with the boing sound all over this overly cheeky theme song of hers. Once we teleport to the entrance, thank fuck we can do that now, we arrive back at town to see that it is devoid of all life, sans the blind woman in the corner of town. I would be sad if it weren't for the fact that we can now loot all of this shit and read this dude's journal. Off to the statue at the center of town, which is now smashed up real nice. It leaves us with the Saint Rune, and now we decide we need to go to the last statue to prevent the revival of Mother. Using the next pyramid, we'll jump over to the next area. We arrive at Port Tinny. It won't take long to learn of the next objective, as this drunkard Bartholomew all but speaks directly to the player on what to do. And in case you didn't get all that, we need a crystal bud, as this guy right here says so as well. Thanks. At least you're making this clear for me. To get the bud, we need to head northwest to the Maze of Death. Don't worry, it's just a name. Move the series of statues in the various areas to unlock the ending zone, which apparently, according to retro achievements, unlocks an optional boss for some hidden goodies. Oh well, zap to the entrance and never look back. Achievements are for chumps. Never mind my gamer score. Get the bud back to Bart, and all his compatriots come in to mock him for being an incelibate. He nabs Slurp without her consent and says that she's his bride and will accompany on the voyage tomorrow. Being the inn that is needed to get to the last statue, our group complies and a short minigame will ensue, trying to get the ceremony correct. The horrendous booing sound is in fact the correct sound, and this even worse booing is the actual boo. For the record, I was saying boo earns. This dipshit, Zed, arrives to destroy the statue, and we are forced into, by his accounts, an unfair fight of 3v1. Once defeated, this lady shows up Jabba Dabba and slices the shit out of our target. We receive the power of the statue, but alas, the main villain is now resurrected.
Shit.
Back on shore, our whispering voice is at an end and our main objective is now clear. As in absolutely not clear at all, thank you Mr. GameFAQs on my next steps. Circle back to the beginning area via the last tower and head to Malama. From here, we head east to Sand River. Sand River is now accessible by bonking this monkey with the wand. Nothing too interesting here, just knowing you have to jump at the right side of this ledge or you have to restart the area. I'm not mad, it's just time out of my day. This is fine. Upon exiting, you will reach the ship graveyard town, which isn't as dismal as it sounds at all. Don't worry, it's just a name. Really, I mean that. Sorry if it sounded sarcastic. A totally random dude sets up the next fetch quest by venturing into the sands into a totally bullshit area that triggered some latent PTSD from within. And I'll distinctly recall the nonsense that this area provides, such as the fact that once you hit this four-way hallway, you simply have to know that when you go south into this chest that the room changes and the game progressing switch is to the left. Fuck you. Bop this creature with a well-timed bomb and beat his ass to acquire the grappling hook, and eventually the bracelet that this widowed husband requested to get this game up and running again. These people clue you on the next plot point, so we head north. Bart's ship arrives and he is asking you for help in clearing the ghost ship that is conveniently appeared from out of nowhere. Since we can never say no, we hop aboard to get lit, grappling, and blowing all our way into this ghostly captain. Once you dust him off the deck, you are reacquainted with Bart, who is so impressed that you are now able to use the ship to travel the high seas. Literally, this thing won't work on the shallowed water. But we are able to make our way back to Adelheid and the cave above it to get this damn chest that's been living in my head rent-free for the last couple of weeks. Ah, completionism. Never mind the boss that I missed, we're not going to go over that. Reaching the Tripillar, the crew needs to separate into 3 distinct directions and move from floor to floor in yet another test of patience from the random battles that truly seems to escalate with each dungeon. Nothing new is added here, and it's really just a guessing game of which way is the most optimal to avoid more encounters. At the top, we fight a very testy version of Tails. Blue Virtue is our reward, which is half of our current goal to get to the upcoming door. Next is Rosetta Town, a self-proclaimed area of entitled rich fucks. The mayor of Fucksville here is ill, and the only means to help him lies in the hands of this outcast, the last of the Ewol people. This girl is apparently ancient, not to be confused with the flower girl known as the Ancient from a yet unreleased JRPG. Help this thing get an herb for the mayor in an unexpectedly simple affair, and you'll gain the attention of Jane in the outskirts of town. She wants assistance raiding the Volcanon Trap, where an ancient weapon is told to be. After dropping a fantastically comical bomb in the doorway, we trudge our way through this area, which mixes things up with some really fucking hot metal on the floors. Reaching N, Jane says she'll check on the room with all of the treasure while you tackle the boss-looking arena. Good deal. The knob that destroyed the city of Adelheid appears in the boss arena, warning of his supercharge that he's going to unleash. This is interrupted with a cutscene of Jane tearing up the place with her ADHD, which proves fortuitous. What ensues is a standard boss battle with Balsec falling to the ground. Once we gain the Red Malice and leave, this cutscene occurs where Balsec is still alive. For a minute, anyhow. The tower is collapsing, and Thrillhole mounts Jane aggressively to prevent her death, and to feel the touch of a woman purely by coincidence. He also suddenly speaks, which I had to do a double take on, as silent protagonists rarely speak, and I mean rarely. In the evil person's room, the Quarter Knights are by their own admission now a Third Knights, and want a replacement. Zed, being as giddy as a schoolgirl, awaits the comical timings of Shadow from Final Fantasy III to make his official appearance. Please remind me in the comments how it's actually Final Fantasy VI, not 3, since the game I played on my Super Nintendo as a kid must have had this symbol on it, and I'm suffering from the Mandela effect. The Death Star produces a shield to protect the bad guys in this scene, providing yet more ominism. Now that we have both gems, we open the door to Giant's Cradle, a test of Zelda logic to avoid spikes and traps galore. I appreciate this area's tricky nature versus the last couple of dungeons, although the enemies here are total dicks and keep infecting the characters with status ailments. At the end of this is a golem that appears to be inactive. Getting this thing active requires finding Emma back at Adelheid and then traversing back to the cave. Thankfully, we warp right back to the Giant, but I honestly think it's dragging the game down already to have us leave in the first place, so I'm giving this dungeon a 5 out of 10. I'm rating the dungeons now, by the way. Actually, no, I'm not. Emma can't wake the golem up, but Slurp's monologue manages to make the creature sentient. Emma doesn't want the being to be used as a weapon, but rather wants the golem to be of his own free will. This somehow works, and we are now in possession of our very own golem to traverse the shallow water, gaining access to inland. We can walk right back to the bad guy's lair, but can't budget, so for now we waddle our way to Court Siem, a quaint little town containing the origins of Thrillhole's mysterious past. Zeppet Rough Knight. He thought of Zeppet as his father. He was an old dream chaser who had raised Thrillhole since infancy. Zeppet was also a master of throwing sticks into fires. One day, the inevitable happened. The old man's traveling days came to an end. Thrillhole was now tasting the true meaning of being alone. Loneliness. The guy in town wants you to go to Epitaph C for gaming reasons. You get the wind-up key, allowing entrance to the labyrinth of conveyor belts. This area has the greatest of all gadgets in the game, the roller skates. This zooms without stopping into any wall and does not count towards your step counter towards random encounters, making this the greatest item ever outside of any RPG that lets you cut down on them. At the top, the ninja Boomerang fights you alongside his trusty wolf spirit. It's a tough battle compared to most for me, mainly because I believe the AI is actually very aggressive towards characters that are weakened and do not fuck around. Our reward for beating him is the Rune Drive, and our latest dungeon is complete. Upon return, Emma wants to confide in you after they throw you a house party. Here, a generic conversation occurs with an admittedly interesting sunrise in the background. This is interrupted by Alizad, who is giving an ultimatum to return the Rune Drive, or the baddies promise to slaughter everyone. This forces the town to evacuate while the party remains to battle everyone. No one shows up, prompting the team to realize that this was predicted by Alizad, and that we need to head south to the shrine that claims to be a safe haven due to a shield that had already failed one town in spectacular fashion. No one knows why the plan failed, but we do get to explore the area for some goodies and bonk this doggo on the head. Hey, come on. Ah, shit! This actually surprised me more than I care to admit, which I guess I just did. This fight was tough as balls, making me use up a lot of my healing consumables. But after we prevail, it allows us to deduce what went wrong. You're taunted by the evil forces and now can proceed to fight Alizad on the basement level. It's a quick and easy fight before we can return to town, and Nikolai and co. augment the golem to allow it to break any magical seal surrounding the Death Star, photosphere. The photosphere is a fun little area that let me make liberal use of the roller skates in a desperate need to avoid battling, featuring plenty of obstacles and a small stealth segment to boot. The hooded figure assists the group once we find a dead end, but promises the goals we have are aligned. That we both don't want absolute complete annihilation of all life in existence. That's a great common goal you got there, buddy. You reach the teardrop, and everyone in the room, including the player, is waiting for the shoe to drop. Instead, the robed figure arises to explain that this is our one chance to kill Mother, and slinks away. I'll see you later. After I misinterpret where to go from here, warp back to the town and rest up, I reach Mother past this stealth sequence for our final confrontation. She's nothing spectacular, but does hit you with random status effects which will always annoy the fuck out of me due to sheer randomness. She goes down, but not without sinking this photosphere to the bottom of the ocean while churning out some terribly translated trash talk. My beauty strikes my thought for the last time. This is the ultimate beauty I can experience, the scattering of self. Shit is going down and we are all doomed. Just kidding. Jane is here along with Bart and Sweet Candy to rescue the group. We got the teardrop back and everything is wrapped up nicely. Much quicker than usual. Okay, psych. The remaining knights arrive on the boat, surrounding the group with their immense numbers and power. But in typical villain fashion, they teleport away after taunting the group rather than just killing us, allowing us to level up and equip ourselves. Smart. Back at the castle, Emma becomes the self-proclaimed leader of the Emma Intelligence Agency. You hand over the book on Iron Birds, a long-lost technology centered around the idea of ships that sail the air. Setting upon the seas once again, now that we have the teardrop, a weird cyclone in this area is now trying to contact us. It's through trial and error and or reading the walkthrough to save myself an hour of wandering, so we do not need to talk to this guy in particular to learn of what spirit is trying to call us out. Upon our return, the being warps us to another dungeon. Do you like pushing things onto blocks? So do I, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. At the end, Lucadia, the eternal flutist, gives us insight into the plans of the spirit realm. Lady Harkin arrives for our boss battle of this area, whom proves to be a pushover. She doesn't die, which means we'll have to fight this boss again. I just can't wait for that. Rather than getting another quest item for our troubles, we get another fast draw for Jabba Dabba and access the inner seas and immediate ass whipping in the random battles. Here the game opens up a bit to allow the group to find the arena, which we are not equipped to handle at the moment, and an upgraded magic graph that gives us all the actually good magic in the game, making Slurp, the most valuable character going forward. I also become irritated at the lack of a map that the sign pointed out to me earlier, and decided to run through the mountain pass again, this time equipped with a random encounter reducer, which I titled appropriately. I look up and down for this thing, but all but gave up, until I realized where I missed it, which makes me question my ability to see things properly. Okay, back to the story. We head to the Demon Lab with a remarkably unremarkable isometric perspective elevator ride that gets reused 3 times. You'll discover some of the evil people's plans to harness the golem as weaponry and the usage of the dark tier. By having possession of the good tier, they have reverse engineered it for the purposes of evil. God, I love old storytelling. It's so generic that it becomes its own kind of awesome. Anywho, you run into Lady Harkin again for another battle, and once finished, you gain more hints of the backstory between her and Jabba Dabba. Now that we have this info, we now, by sheer randomness, return to Baskar Village to talk to this guy, gaining knowledge of the lab to the west, containing an Ocarina of Golem summoning. We arrive through the Wandering Isle to the Dead Sanctuary, a lengthy push-block affair ending with another battle with Boomerang, who once again doesn't die, but preludes to what I'm guessing will be a trifecta of fights. Before we get to leave, we're pulled into a dimensional rift from the baddies, and another surprise dungeon awaits us. This one ends up having some comic relief from Zed, who is thwarted repeatedly by some simple puzzle solving, although I need to admit this one got me for a minute. You finally reach Zed, who unleashes the Golem Diablo on you, who hits like a tank. Probably because it is one. After you slap it down, you make your way to Zed once again, who is pushed aside by Siegfried, who wisely does not want to fuck around anymore. But since he didn't murk us the first 5 opportunities, we are able to overcome his Golbez looking ass swiftly, causing this sequence to occur where he overloads the generator while trying to pull everyone inside. He grapples Thrillho, who slices off his own arm to prevent a pull-in. The party escapes using a miracle from the tier, while Siegfried ends up back at the destroyed photosphere. He's crawling away when a familiar laugh dot wave emanates from above, with this rather creepy outcome. With your powers combined, we'll have a final boss, methinks. Meanwhile, it's discovered that Thrillho is actually cybernetic and cannot be healed by conventional means, besides the 1,000 times he's been healed in this game up to this point, but you get the idea. To cure him, the remaining 2 party members head to Rosetta Town to talk to the Elu character, who sends us back 1,000 years into the past by slicing her arm like really wide open. The tribesmen of this time are very peculiar towards humans, but eventually buckle to pressure from ideologies of saving the world. So our next task is to track down Mariel's brother Vasim, who was exiled due to his sheer awesomeness, who may be Thrillho's only hope. But first, we need to travel through the forest prison, a maze featuring a dog that tells us the solution to finding the exit. But first, I mercifully stumble on one of the 2 upcoming tasks, finding this guardian in the largest chest in the game. Finding Vasim, he is reluctant to heal our hero due to the risk of tampering with the creating of the ultimate weapon, his reason for exile. But through a series of seemingly endless moralistic platitudes, we convince him of our needs, and he gives us 2 things to find. One we already found, and the other is a book called Dele Metallica, one of maybe 5 things I remember from playing this game 28 years ago, and by a miracle back then, something I also took a mental note of during Slurp's tutorial. It's a book in the final room of her initial dungeon, sitting on a shelf. All we need to do is reach it again, and we will warp to the book's dimension. De La Metallica is a very linear dungeon with some vague puzzles thrown in to give you more opportunities to kill books, which I end up doing on the behest of the walkthrough, in the off chance of this book dropping the Necronomicon, Slurp's ultimate left-hand object. I finally ground for it, and got an immediate statistic boner from the result. Good shit, David K. Even Slurp's excited for it. Look at that little butt wiggle. After reaching the end, Slurp is sharing a dream with Thrillho, who is repeatedly comforted by his adopted father in various scenarios where he was rejected by children for being different. If it weren't for the outdated translation and sentimental garbage, this would be an effective scene nowadays. But to be fair, this was perfectly acceptable storytelling at this precise moment in history. Slurps keeps trying to call out for Thrillho to snap out of it, revealing the dream-eating bitch Elizabeth I to be the culprit. You slap her down in order to wake up, with our silent protagonist staring out the window like a goddamn freak. With our party reunited and our Elu character parting ways, we switch gears upon re-entry into the normal timeline, with Emma showing us the Proto-Wing, our airship of Wild Arms. It currently does not fly over mountains, meaning it only has about 2 spots in the map it can actually travel to that isn't already traversable. It's also presented in a hideous perspective that I simply cannot wrap my head around, as we're dealing with PlayStation hardware, and this looks like shit and is nauseating. We need to collect one of 2 pieces of Gemini circuits found in the peculiarly named Gemini's corpse. It's a fairly tricky dungeon, utilizing a lot of the tools that we've acquainted thus far, but nothing that can't be figured out in seconds of pondering. After we smack the metal drake down at the end, we report our success to Emma, who is hearing good news about Bart's findings of the other circuit until she hears the bad news seconds later. The ship is destroyed right after this terrible joke aimed at the 4th wall. The ship is lost, and the team presumes the other Gemini circuit lost at sea. We reconvene at Castle Adelheid, where we collectively shrug at the next step. The next step? Go right back to the beach at the graveyard because it washed up ashore. Basically, either developers really wanted you to read the foreshadowing from the occasional townsfolk about how everything washes up on that beach, or they wanted you to explore every option on the map before exhausting your options, returning you to the exact fucking spot you were a minute ago. Based on my rage thinking about the amount of lost time every gamer has likely suffered in this area, I'm going with the latter. The ship is now upgraded and we now can fly much higher, unlocking the entire map, which is, I think, about 2 more spots. The first spot is Pandemonium. This dungeon starts off fairly standard, but is quickly given a boss battle against Gamera. After this fight, we are trapped and imprisoned into individual cells, and our only hope is this rat. Thankfully, Handpan doesn't have to fight anything, but I do suffer this utter bullshit here for going in this direction for no reason other than to waste my time. Fuck off, devs. The rest of this dungeon is swapping characters to get everyone together using some standard trickery. We fight the Demon Prophet to exit the area, who prophesizes his demise about 5 seconds before croaking. We fight another boss, Shazam, before reaching the end of Pandemonium, finally reaching the Darkness tier. It shoots out evil to the same satellites that we used to teleport earlier in the game, bringing about a diet version of Kefka's destruction in Final Fantasy III. And I'm going to call it 3 for the rest of my life, fuckers. Come at me. Jabba Dabba breaks the crystal, injuring himself and freeing his former knight in arms, spoiler, and once awakened needs to settle the score. We drop at Artica Castle and Jabba Dabba fights Harkin in a 1v1 battle, wounding her mortally. Not much mortally that she won't shower us with vacacious bullshit afterwards, but maybe it's the urge to finish this game creeping in. Here are a few words for you from the dead. I don't care how boring or terrible things get. Protect this world, the world that provided for us to meet. During this tragedy, this guardian is summoned in the middle of the death scene, creating a comically awkward moment that I think missed the mark of its intended seriousness. It reminds me of the tree growing out of the old man in Legend of Legaia, because this makes up for how tragic the scenario is. Now watch as this fresh corpse gets enveloped by a tree. Woo! It just doesn't work. At the end of this dungeon, a calamity is unfolding from the events earlier, and the beautifully named evil tower rises from the ocean. Kadingle, the power deemed too uncontrollable to be used by the Guardians, has been found by Siegfried. All the jokes aside from the name Kadingle, it looks like a fine final dungeon to approach. You fight Boomerang one last time at the entrance, and he's so impressed with us that he sacrifices himself for us to press onward, despite being able to walk right back a second later to retrieve his weapon. Now to press onward. I'm not going to lie, my experience with the final dungeon took a lot of energy out of me. What is expected for a final dungeon still managed to surprise me in regards to absolute pain and misery in the form of pure, unadulterated time wasting, from extremely tough enemies that are all but impossible to run away from, confusing, samey hallways, and pipes containing legitimately good endgame gear that you should most certainly equip for the fights ahead, and one of the most insidiously designed asshole dungeon minigames I have ever seen. I did not have fun at the end and lost all of my patience in one fell swoop. Adding to this is the complete lack of returning to the overworld without having to retread the entire goddamn thing all over again, and I found myself nearly out of magic consumables at the conclusion, making it stressful to boot. To put it another way, this dungeon sucked hard, succulent butt cheeks. At the end of the first segment, we also get to finish off Alazad, who derobes to reveal a rather interesting monster design, especially for this game. He goes kaput and we transport deeper within. There's a trifecta of mini dungeons to acquire 3 objects: the wings, arms, and eye. After what felt like an eternity, I place all 3 in for the final confrontation, or at least I thought. See, in this cave, there are around 8 chests containing the eye, and only one way to know which one is correct is to pass by this eye to see if it's the right one, or you have to put it back, and guess again by running through the tunnels, fighting random encounters the entire time. But hey, just follow the walkthrough, right? Well, there's a problem with that there too, Mr. Guy. Joking or not, he completely fucks up this exact part of the walkthrough, leaving me likely more confused than I ever would have by just guessing, since I ended up finding the correct one on my 7th attempt. That's 6 returns to the previous chest. I guess I deserve this for reading the reference, don't I? Fuck the developers, screw anyone that defends this nonsense. Moving on before I smash my keyboard into submission while typing the script for this. You can tell I'm more relaxed now that I'm doing the voice. Placing the utter bullshit into each slot will grant us the final confrontation. Siegfried pops out once again to antagonize everyone with his ever-changing motivations. Upon defeat, he still unleashes his full might of the machine, creating a sort of eclipse on the world. He disappears to be replaced with Motherfried, a tasty combination of Mother and Siegfried. This fight is a lot tougher, as to be expected, but isn't the end of the world. After we prevail, our happy music finally plays out, shoe ready to drop at any moment, since we have full control of the game still. And now we have our final confrontation, baby. He's pretty easy since we have a lot of OP consumables left, but this game didn't make having those necessarily easy either. Ha 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 ha, no one can beat me, and then proceeds to be beaten. Our heroes teleport to the entrance and in a last-ditch effort to save them are shielded by our golem friend. What a guy. The ending of Wild Arms might be heartwarming to many, and I'm not there to ruin that for you, but I advise you to watch a long play for the whole experience. I, however, have become so jaded to the absolute mountain of preachy garbage that these characters spew out of their faces regarding courage, love, and friendship that I almost actually got sick to my stomach. It's very long, very thorough, and essentially is what you would want if you were truly invested as a kid playing this. As an adult, it's rough. What I'm trying to say is, it's perfectly fine as an ending, just not my cup of joe. The exacerbation of finally finishing this game has not lost its luster, and having cut out days, literally days of random battle time wasted by fast forwarding through the tedium, I simply cannot fathom how I had the patience for this back then. It's actually some of the most egregious random encounter rates I've seen, not necessarily by the raid itself, but the amount of exposure to it over the course of the many dungeons you traverse in the game. That's the part of the game I also found endearing. The sheer quantity of content in this game reminded me of this exact time in history. This is an era of longer games being a selling point, regardless of why that is. Sequences that are dragged on too long were rarely called out in publications, who in retrospect probably didn't even beat the game half the time. So to sell more copies and to boast about having an 80-hour long adventure for $60 helped that parent buy this thing over the other games, at least in theory. There's so many things that are out of date with this title, but at the same time were perfectly fine back then. Random encounters were the norm. The triple protagonist game style was standard at this point, much to the dismay of people like I that enjoy challenge when fighting in RPGs, beyond paying attention and grinding. The story was as mature as any of the competing titles were, as once again, the big man on campus wasn't quite out yet to throw out conventional JRPG storytelling and presentation out the window. The battle system starts off very boring and does little to make things interesting. It takes around 20 hours of gameplay back then, before the plot and added gameplay mechanics to start to get your attention during encounters. Mainly an insistence of a plethora of status ailments that at no point in this game will have an issue applying to your characters. Pretty much all of my deaths on this revisit were by triple application of stun locks that kept me from doing much to address it, which made me into a sad panda. But having a challenge on this level kept the game from becoming stale, so it's at least something to pay attention to, especially with the dreaded 3-player battle system, something that I personally just dislike for the lack of complexity in a clearly not at all complex system. The game isn't original whatsoever outside of the motif that its sales pitch is presented, a spaghetti western added with some sci-fi sprinkled on. And that definitely works. Just about every overworld segment is lifted shamelessly, almost illegally, from Zelda, A Link to the Past. But since that is a timeless classic, ripping off the best isn't the worst thing if it's done right. And they certainly nailed that part of the game. My true gripe, regardless of the time this game was made, is the layout of these dungeons, that on occasion are just slapped together to waste the player's time, and with the amount of the typical bullshit reasons why you progress will stunt on a playthrough, it's just a meanie thing to do, bruh. Why do you gotta do that, bruh? With those gripes out of the way, I do appreciate the overworld design with this. Not necessarily by the presentation, although that's fine, but the way you slowly unlock progression and access more of the overworld in a careful manner, keeping the world alive and feeling like you can explore back and forth rather than just moving in a straight line. The NPCs are programmed well to keep up with current events and keep you invested in speaking to them, sometimes keeping very vital information in their little prompts. Again, it's nothing new whatsoever, but it's executed well here. A Comparison is the theft of joy, but there is no way people back then, including myself, didn't have the magazine images of Final Fantasy VII in their minds when these obnoxiously oversized character models plopped on screen. I also question the fantastically drawn initial FMV sequences style truncated into these super deformed models that also will be squished into these things when the battle starts, which is where so much of this time is spent. The key to these games having a successful loop, in my opinion, lies in connecting with your characters in these fight sequences, feeling powerful and badass when you unleash your ultimate attack, and so forth. Here you have your Lego-looking motherfucker that is not well animated, and most attacks look identical to the last one, with only some numbers popping up to signify any real change. Accompanying this is a very mediocre soundtrack with a couple of bangers carrying the heavy load. I remember so many times taking in deep breath before getting the will to continue this adventure, knowing the length of time between saving your progress took sometimes hours due to the tedium. But that opening theme, brother. It's just so goddamn good, as is the overworld theme. You want a spicy hot take? I believe that a really good theme song can carry so much more weight than a story than just about everything else. And as a consequence, Skyrim remains one of the most overrated games of all time, as that fucking theme song carried the game's utter RNG, endless side-questing bullshit on its back for dozens of hours beyond what the game actually offers people. Oh, fuck! Oh, sorry, slipped on my soapbox. So, Wild Arms, what an adventure this game was. Riding the wave between old-school gameplay mechanics and trying to live in the enormous shadow of its inevitable competitor made this a relic in time. It was a success in the minds of its players, maintaining a base of classic JRPG fans that has released up to the PlayStation 4, and in the age of endless reboots of old games, who knows, we might get one yet. Would it have an endless hallway design instead of an open world to explore? You bet your ass. The specific genre is all but dead to the world, buddy. Sorry. Now march.